Hello everyone, George Dos Santos here with a look at the market for the week ending Friday, May 22nd, 2020. Um, Now, before we go any further, we need to bring up this disclaimer here, and I urge you to read it. You know, this business of investing and trading is not an easy task at all. Anybody who has tried their hand at it will realize that. It's a very difficult thing, perhaps one of the most difficult endeavors you can approach. Um, So realize that this is not an attempt to give any particular person advice on how they should invest because there's no way I could possibly do that, even if I were qualified to do so. I'm a psychologist and I invest my own money and um, and I make a video for myself and I put it on YouTube and for some of my family and close friends. Anyone can look at it, but it's not to be interpreted as an attempt to give professional advice. So we'll start as usual by of the S&P 500. My overall, view of this chart is that it looks as though we're still bumping up in that area of resistance near the 50-day moving average, which is this magenta line. You can see it extends out here, and the 30 weighted moving average, which is this green line. So we're still in this area here where there's a big sort of like tug of war going on between the bulls and the bears. We just finished slightly above. We seem to have closed slightly above those two moving averages, the 50 and the 30 weighted moving average. So that's encouraging from a bullish standpoint. But we don't want to walk around sleeping like one of my patients said to me once. Uh, we want to walk around with our eyes wide open, especially if there are snakes in the grass. We, it could be pretty dangerous. So keep your eyes open. Now, insofar as bullishness is concerned, we still have the parabolic below the most recent bar. And so therefore, the parabolic is saying it's called a parabolic stop and reverse indicator. And I am using a different set of parameters than the default ones. But in any case, um, it is still indicating that we're in an uptrend on the weekly chart. This is confirmed by MACD printing a green bar here, a green histogram bar, indicating that the bulls are more in charge now than the bears. See, we had an MACD trending up from below the zero line, which is what we want to see if we're going to be owning and buying stocks. So that's good. That's bullish. Williams percentile crossed above the key magenta line there at minus 50 lines some time ago. This was back on April 9, or a little later than that, maybe around April 10th. April 17. Oh, this is a weekly chart. So, yeah, it crossed here anyway, and it's still above the magenta line. We don't get confirmation from this some of the rate of change indicator. We seem to have bumped off it a couple of times. But the weight of evidence here is that this market looks like it wants to go higher. There are some snakes in the grass, which we'll identify a few more, such as the resistances, etc. So let's look at a daily chart. So here's a daily chart of the S&P 500. As usual, we look at the moving averages. You see the 4 exponential moving averages above the 9 exponential moving average, and that is above the 30 weighted moving average. It's interesting to note here that the 9 EMA never crossed below the 30 weighted moving average. Since it crossed above it here, it never went back below it. So it continued to indicate an uptrend even from this period here, which was what, April 8th or so. So that's a very good sign from a bullish standpoint. Um, Parabolic is still below the most recent bar. Last week it switched to bullishness here, uptrend, because the past 5 days, right? So it switched to an uptrend here last Monday, continued to remain indicating an uptrend. And so we just basically bumped off of the 2 standard deviation line right here. and came back a bit, but it's still looking pretty bullish to me. Insofar as any other snake in the grass besides the resistance we encountered on the weekly chart, you can see here that we made a higher high than this high, but it seems as though MACD so far has been tracing a slightly lower high than this high here. I should say this one. Okay, so there's a potential here, as I mentioned last week, for a bearish divergence of MACD, which could take the market down at least temporarily. Okay, for a short pullback, at least a short pullback. Now we have confirmation here from Williams again. It's remaining above the magenta line, and some of the rate of change indicator stays above the magenta line. So the most of the evidence leans toward a bullish interpretation of this market. And before we leave the S&P, let's look at the cloud, Ishimoku cloud. And you'll see that on a weekly chart, it's just bumping up against this upper line of the cloud here. I forget what this line is called. Anyway, it is likely to break above it. We hope so anyway. You see, we had a nice bullish engulfing candle here, and since then we went up. So it's within the cloud, gives a little pause, but it's still looking pretty good. And here's more support for the bullishness of this market, and that is one of Jake Bernstein's charts that I plotted on TC here. The indicators that he uses. There's a 10 simple moving average of the highs and an 8 simple moving average of the lows. And the way he uses this is that when you get two complete bars, the entire bar is above the 10 simple moving average, and you get confirmation here from the accumulation distribution line. You cross above the average, the moving average, the 57. There's confirmation. So there's confirmation of the uptrend. But now you know there's always on the other hand. And here's another sort of snake in the grass. Here's the momentum indicator that he uses. And the momentum indicator is trending down. And you can see that divergence of MACD here, and also force index, which is short term. Force index is indicating a divergence here too. So you'll always find some conflicting evidence if you look close enough. All right, let's leave the S&P for now. We'll go to individual stocks. So let's use Shaken Analytics software, and I got their permission to do this. And take a look at some ETFs that we usually take a look at, and also some individual stocks. So here we have the sector ETFs, and in addition to this QQQ, which is not a sector, of course, but the Qs and the sector ETFs rated from best performing to worst performing at this time. So we have the Qs performing well. We have the XLV, which is the healthcare. It's down a little bit recently, I think. XLC has been performing well. XLK is the technology sector. And recently, the discretionary stocks have been picking up a bit. But notice some of these are now overbought, like discretionary is overbought up here, right? Overbought. But in most cases, if you want to own any of these, and I own these four here, so I like to own those. So I spent some time yesterday taking a look at all of the different lists that I have and looking for stocks that look as though they are worth a second look, if you wish. In other words, are they overbought, oversold? We usually want to buy stocks when they're oversold, according to the Shaken analytic system. So here's a long list, and you can see that most of them were up on Friday. These green indications here, percentages indicate that all these were up on Friday. So let me start at the top. We have a few minutes to do this. So if we go to Cadence Design, which is a stock I used to own, you can see that it's overbought, but it's worthwhile keeping it on the list because it has a very bullish rating. And I could bring up the checklist here for some of these. You can see most of these are green. It's saying wait because it's overbought. And you can see how the relative strength is pretty strong, and money flow is also positive. So that's a good one to keep, but I want to buy it when it's oversold. Now, I don't own any, most of these stocks I don't own, okay? I'm just coming up with a shopping list, okay? Here's a stock that I don't own, I'm telling you. Here's one that is oversold. I never heard of it before, but it's all green. It's saying that it's early to buy because you see, Shaken wants to see this indicator tick up before it says, you know, it's optimal buy, okay? But look at the money flow, look at the relative strength, and also the fact that it's very bullish. Qs. Well, we saw Qs before. Now it's not quite oversold because it's in the neutral area, but we do have a very bullish rating. You can see a very bullish rating here, and you can see relative strength is positive, and also money flow. Adobe, I'll do as many as I can. Adobe, you can see very similarly, you have a bullish rating. This green bar, bullish. Relative strength is good, not quite oversold, but trending up nicely. It's want to wait for an oversold signal. These are all shopping lists, right? Now these are two ETFs that I find interesting. These people do some significant research. The person who heads up this ARK ETF organization, she is very fond of Tesla. She has a lot of shares of Tesla. In any case, does make her a bad person. So this thing is trending up. Look at this. It's making a higher high than the previous high over here back in February. I like that. And the second one that they run, the other ETF, similarly. So I want to keep an eye on that. I might look to buy some myself. But if they're overbought, I don't want them. Now take a look at Salesforce is now almost oversold. So we can bring up that and you can see it's neutral, but it's approaching the oversold region. It's worth a gander here. It's bullish. Relative strength is strong. Money flow is strong. Citrix is one of those that we have on the stocks for the lockdown. And you can see that it's bullish. Relative strength came down a bit, but it's oversold. So it's one to keep in mind. eBay is bullish and relative strength is pretty good. Look at that, very strong. It's not quite oversold, but it's been doing, look at this chart, very nice. I missed that move. How about Facebook? Facebook has been trending up from a low level in the neutral zone, hasn't quite been oversold, but it took off on a rant here. Now, look at relative strength. You see it's changes personality right here, right in this area here, right? It changes personality and it took off on a nice run. Home Depot is becoming oversold and relative strength is good, and money flow just turned positive. Intel I own. It's now becoming overbought, but I did buy it somewhere here. So you want to wait till it's oversold if you don't have it. iPay, I used to own it, but I still own some shares in one of my accounts. You can see that it's neutral and it's trending up again. The credit cards are doing well again. The home builders are tending to do well again. You could see it wasn't quite oversold, but trending up. Let me bring up the rest of the list for you because you're running out of time. I'm going to bring up the rest of the list so that you could copy any that you want. You could see DocuSign here, and also Apple, and Workday, and all of these stocks. Look at the green. All of them were up on Friday. Visa is in this group, and also CrowdStrike, which is one that I like, but it's overbought. So this is my watch list. I want to wish all the people who serve this country Happy Memorial Day. Thank you for your service, and